It was a Friday afternoon when I stumbled upon the unexpected. Inigo's computer had been running slowly for weeks, so he offered to organize his files and clear his browsing history. He, as always, was distracted and carefree. "Do whatever you want, darling," he said with a quick smile before leaving for work. I was left alone in the living room with a cup of coffee and the soft murmur of rain on the rooftops of Bilbao. What I found wasn't a virus or a disorganized folder. It was one search after another, my wife with another man, cuckolded with a sense of purpose, my wife with a younger lover. The words hit me with a mixture of astonishment, bewilderment, and something harder to name. I sat up straight, as if my body knew something had changed. The coffee grew cold as I read, my heart pounding with a mixture of surprise and uneasy curiosity. Inigo had always been a methodical man. An engineer of fixed routines, a lover of calm, reserved in his desires. I would never have imagined that his imagination ventured into such unexpected corners. For years, our marriage had been peaceful, proper, even happy. But this was a threshold we had never crossed. I slowly closed the laptop. For days, I kept the secret as if it were a dangerous artifact. But inside me, something stirred. I thought about it while cooking, while showering, while walking down the main street. What at first was a shock gradually transformed into a recurring question, and yes. What if this was something he truly desired? What if this was also something I could explore? The following Sunday, as he read the newspaper on the terrace, I sat silently across from him. I observed him closely, his serene gaze, the slight gesture of concentration as he turned the page, the meticulous way he folded the paper. I loved him, undoubtedly. But now, a new shadow loomed over me, the shadow of a woman who, for the first time, considered crossing an unwritten line. I didn't sleep that night. I wondered what he would think if he knew I knew. If I would hurt him. If I would give him pleasure. I wondered if, perhaps, he wanted to be discovered. The possibility unsettled me, and it pulled me forward. I searched. It took days, but I did it. A discreet forum, a private conversation, an intriguing profile. A young man, 20 years younger than me, who introduced himself as an architecture student. Tall, confident, explicit in his words without being vulgar. "I like to take women to places they didn't know they could go," he wrote. His name was Ider. I told him I wasn't promising anything. I told him I was married and that my intention was simply to understand something. He didn't mock me, he wasn't surprised. He replied with respect, with elegance, with a tone that made me feel desired, not judged. 2 weeks passed. And one afternoon, I wrote to him. "See you Thursday. My house is 6. I timed it to coincide with the time I usually got home from work. Thursday dawned gray. Bilbao has always had that ability to envelop you in its melancholy, as if the sky knew how to keep secrets. I spent the day restless, going over every corner of the house, second-guessing my steps, feeling the pulse of my decision with every movement. At 5 o'clock sharp, I lit a candle in the living room. I didn't want harsh lights. I wanted shadows, nuances, heavy silences. I showered slowly, dressed with a care I hadn't taken in years. I chose a simple but fitted black dress with thin straps. No bra. An almost poetic choice, as if the nakedness I was about to reveal was more than physical, emotional, intimate, unrepeatable. When the doorbell rang, my body tensed. Ader was there. And everything that had been theory, suspicion, and fantasy became flesh and blood. He opened the door with a restrained smile. He was wearing jeans, a white shirt, and his gaze was unwavering. He came in without a word. I closed the door. The cup was silent, except for the ticking of a distant clock. I married him in the living room. My fingers trembled, but not my will. He looked at me as if he knew that this moment was bigger than us. He brushed my cheek with a brief caress. I closed my eyes. That's when I left the door ajar. Not out of forgetfulness, not out of carelessness, but for something I couldn't yet name, but that I sensed. Inigo usually came home at 6:30. I knew he could arrive earlier, or that he could be late. I knew anything could happen. And yet, I didn't close it. Minutes later, when the tension had finally found its cause, I heard the elevator. And then, the key. The soft click of the lock. The cup was silent, except for the ticking of a distant clock. I married him in the living room. My fingers trembled, but not my will. He looked at me as if he knew that this moment was bigger than us. He brushed my cheek with a brief caress. I closed my eyes. That's when I left the door ajar. Not out of forgetfulness, not out of carelessness, but for something I couldn't yet name, but that I sensed. Inigo usually came home at 6:30. I knew he could arrive earlier, or that he could be late. I knew anything could happen. And yet, I didn't close it. Minutes later, when the tension had finally found its cause, I heard the elevator. And then, the key. The soft click of the lock. Ida noticed. He glanced at me, unfazed, and carried on. I held my breath. The world stopped. Inigo opened the door. I couldn't see him directly. But I knew he was there. I knew it from the silence, from the lack of interruption. Because he said nothing. Because he was watching. The next morning, the coffee tasted different. Inigo was in the kitchen before me, which wasn't usual. He was wearing his gray shirt, the one he always wore when he was restless. He greeted me with a soft, "Good morning," as if we were playing at pretending everything was normal. I nodded and sat down across from him. For minutes, only the crunch of bread and the steam from the coffee maker could be heard. Until he spoke, I saw what had happened yesterday. His voice held no reproach. Nor anger. It held interest. Curiosity. Even desire. I looked at him. Without defenses. I know, I replied. He lowered his gaze to his coffee, then raised it and held mine. He dared. You liked it? A direct question. Honest, vulnerable. Yes, I said, without hesitation, without hiding. Inigo sighed, not with resignation, but with something closer to relief. Would you like to do it again? The question hung between us like a tacit agreement. I didn't answer immediately. I got up, rolled the table, and sat on his lap. I looked into his eyes, cupped his face in my hands, and said, "Only if you want to see it again." He smiled. He closed his eyes briefly, as if savoring the image. Then he nodded. Not like someone resigned, but like someone willingly entering a new room in the house of desire. During the following days, the atmosphere in the house changed. It wasn't tension, but a new energy, as if Inigo and I had found a secret language. We looked at each other differently, more deliberately, with more intention. Something had been unleashed between us, a kind of electric complicity we had never known before. One night, while we were having dinner at a small restaurant in the old town, he broke the silence. If we're going to continue, we need rules. I nodded. I liked that he took the initiative. I looked at him curiously. What kind of rules? He took a sip of wine. Then he looked at me with those eyes that had been familiar to me for years, but which now held a new gleam. I want to know when it's going to happen. I want to be present, though not necessarily visible. I want you to be the one to choose. But above all, I want you to never exclude me emotionally. That moved me deeply. It wasn't a fantasy of domination. It was something else, a way of being, a shared surrender, a radical exploration of trust. Echo, I said, and took his hand on the table. That's when we first used those words that until then had only been whispered on the internet, consenting cuckold, consenting wife. Saying it out loud didn't make it vulgar, it made it real. Inigo wasn't being humiliated. He was participating in something he deeply desired, and so did I. We chose the following Thursday. Same time. Same gray city. This time there were no nerves, only anticipation. Ida returned. His attitude was different, more confident, more attentive. He treated me with respect, with desire, but also with the awareness that someone else was there. Someone watching from the shadows of the hallway, behind the closed door of the studio. Before it all began, I walked toward where I knew Inigo could see me. I stopped. I looked at him, even though he remained in the shadows. I slowly unbuttoned my blouse. I wanted him to know that I did everything for him, even if it wasn't with him. That simple yet intense gesture marked a new beginning. Later, when the house fell silent again, I sat beside him. There were no words, only a long embrace. A shared sigh. As the weeks passed, the dynamic deepened. It wasn't something we did every day, or even every week. But it became a sacred, intimate space, completely ours. Bilbao remained its usual self outside, its streets, its bridges, its tram cruising along the Nervian River. But inside our apartment, a parallel story was unfolding. One without a script, but without a purpose. What surprised me most wasn't the pleasure, but the communication that blossomed between us. Inigo asked me with genuine interest how I had felt, what I had experienced, what I had liked or disliked. I did the same to him. We had never listened to each other like that before. We had never been so honest. Ader, for his part, became more than just a third party. He never invaded our bond, but he enriched it. He taught us that desire doesn't have to be linear, that emotional fidelity can be expressed in unexpected ways. Everything was going with an unexpected, almost unsettling harmony. We had managed to build a small universe where desire, consent, and sincerity coexisted without breaking us. But that same stability brought with it a new kind of fear, the fear that everything would shatter. One afternoon, Inigo arrived earlier than expected. I hadn't expected to see him until 7, and Ida was already home. We had decided not to repeat the previous scene, so I didn't leave the door ajar. Everything was more intimate, more private. But the doorbell rang at 6:30. I opened it, my heart pounding with fear. "Is Ida here?" Inigo asked without raising his voice. I nodded. He came in. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "This time I don't want to watch. I just want to be with you afterward." That sentence shook me more than any previous scene. It reminded me that above all else, we were still us. Inigo and I, husband and wife. Partners in something new, yes, but partners nonetheless. That night, after Inigo left, we hugged for a whole hour in silence. He stroked my hair, I rested my head on his chest. There were no words, but there was a certainty. We were exploring the edge of something profound, and we didn't want to lose each other along the way. It was a rainy night. Bilbao was shrouded in mist, and the city seemed suspended in a long sigh. Inigo suggested we walk, like we used to do years ago, when we didn't yet know all that we know now. We walked to the Subizuri Bridge. There, leaning against the railing, he said to me, "What we're experiencing isn't just a game, is it?" "No," I replied, looking at the lights reflected in the water. "It isn't. It's real." He nodded. Then, after a long silence, he confessed. "I've discovered a part of myself I didn't know existed. And I like it. But above all, I've discovered a part of you that fascinates me. I've never seen you so alive, so fulfilled. And that, more than desire, is what matters most." I cried silently, not from sadness, but from the profoundness of what we had found. We walked home hand in hand. We didn't make love that night. We looked at each other, caressed each other, and slept in each other's arms. It was enough. Without signing it, without writing it down, a new kind of contract was established between us. Not based on external rules, but on absolute honesty. Not everything was either, nor would it ever be. There were days when we just wanted to watch movies, cook together, or walk through the old town. But we knew that this possibility, the possibility of seeing each other desiring others from a place of deep love, had changed us forever. We continued exploring. Carefully. With love, with the certainty that desire, when shared with consent and admiration, can unite more than divide. And so, in the gray and magical city of Bilbao, Inigo and I wrote a story that was only ours. A story of desire and mature love.